You'll have seen him on your screens during the Gulf War. Those of you who watch Al Jazeera will have seen his program there. But Raage doesn't stand still. He is now with Channel 4 at ITV as their International Affairs Director. He's a very interesting fellow because he knows an awful lot about two different cultures, the British culture and the Somaliland culture. And I can't think of anyone better today than to bridge that divide in a few words to you. So without further ado, Raage, over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Hayden. Thank you. Thank you for those very kind words. Your Excellencies, First Lady, honoured guests. It's a great privilege just to try and say a few words, because I speak to you not just as a reporter and a documentary filmmaker who has covered the region and Somaliland, but as someone who has a very personal stake in the country, not only just coming from there, but having family living and working there. I remember first going back to Hargeisa. It was shortly after the Civil War had ended. I was just starting out in journalism. I'd finished at university, had a 3-month traineeship at the BBC. I went to Addis Ababa and made that journey by bus from the refugee camps in Dul'ad, just across the border, and went over with refugees to a city that was quite, the only way to describe it was completely destroyed. There was barely a building that didn't look like sort of Swiss cheese with holes right the way through it. And yet even from that sort of moment, and I remember going back to my family home, I hadn't seen it really since I was 4 or 5 properly. One other visit when I was 12 or 13, walked in and there was a family just living there who'd lost their home, had sort of was squatting in our sort of house. I think they got quite worried when they saw me. I thought they thought I'd come to drive them out, but I reassured them, don't worry, you can stay. But I think the most important thing is that from that time, when Somaliland really had to pick itself up from almost, well, beyond nothing actually, there was very little. There was a drive and a determination and a sense of pride amongst the people to make a real success. It was almost a blank slate, which a lot of other countries in sub-Saharan Africa have never really sort of had. It was, everything was a blank slate and everything had to be rebuilt. Fast forward today to this conference and you see, some people who weren't even born at the end of the Civil War today, who have gone to university here and keen in the diaspora to try and make a difference back in their own country, and people who themselves had fought in that Civil War and are now businessmen or doctors or entrepreneurs trying to continue that. And I think it's very important, this kind of meeting, and it's been long overdue, simply because you're quite aware when you're in Somaliland of the huge human potential and potential of the country, not only just in its people, but in its vast untapped sort of resources. But often there isn't the real basis for making contacts and inroads and networks with people in the international commercial community. And vice versa for a lot of people, investors and companies who are increasingly interested in the awakening of the economic potential of sub-Saharan Africa, about who your potential partners are, not beyond the government, but in terms of individuals and companies, whether it's in agriculture, whether it's in extractive industries, whether it's in infrastructure. And I think what is remarkable here in feeling the energy is that it's an opportunity for both those worlds to actually see there are people with the same aims as them and with the same desire to actually build and, let's not mince words, to actually create wealth. And I think that this should only just be the start of what I hope will be many other such conferences that enable people from both the Somaliland and Somaliland diaspora and international companies and investors to see that they have like minds and a similar vision. And I also would just say, going back and putting my journalistic hat on, is that I've walked away from many different societies where you'd think that the level of upheaval and destruction would take many sort of years to overcome. I think what Somaliland does is that it holds out a very rare beacon that never sort of think that even from a blank slate that things cannot be built very quickly, but that there isn't also the will on behalf of the governments there to try and help engender that process. I just like to say I wish everybody here every success, and just to realise that, to quote previous British politicians, that Somaliland is very much open for business and would very much like the help and cooperation, and that what you will find is a very permissive and enabling environment. I think that's the key thing I'd like to get across to companies, many of whom I've talked to in a very unofficial capacity. You will find an environment in terms of the government and regulatory bodies that want to help you and enable you to achieve what you can. But they also need help to spread the word about Somaliland amongst your colleagues. Thank you.